idea was for smallholder farmers to have access to the technologies of fertilizers and hybrid seeds and pesticides that had been exclusively available to the white commercial farmers and a few selected Black African farmers. So there was, in the 80s, there was a very successful extension of the Green Revolution to smallholder farmers, to the extent that by the end of the 80s, the smallholder farmers were growing most of the maize in the country, whereas before it had been the commercial farmers. And during that time as well, there was a whole push on maize as food, and food security was seen nationally as if the country had enough maize, then there was enough food. So in many ways, Zimbabwe has been one of the most successful countries in pushing the Green Revolution. It's changed a little bit in the 20s, but in the 80s and 90s, it was extremely successful. And even today, that mindset remains. It's very difficult for many people to conceive of the idea of growing any crops without soluble chemical fertilizers. But there have been some people who have resisted this, and more people are recognizing that this was a big mistake for many reasons, for the soil and for nutrition. And foremost amongst those were people like those you're going to hear from today. So I'm very happy to be able to introduce to you our speakers today. Elizabeth Mpofu is still trying to join us. She has a bad connection. We hope that she will be able to join us. But she's been a farmer with the Shashe community. Here she's coming to join right now. With the Shashe community since they first resettled on land reform land in 2000 and was a founder there. And when ZIMSOFF, the Zimbabwe Small Scale Organic Farmers Forum, was formed in 2003, she was the founding chairperson of that and continued for many years and led the establishment of ZIMSOFF. She also has been since 2014 the general coordinator for La Via Campesina, partly because La Via Campesina has been housed at ZIMSOFF. And also recently, Elizabeth has set up an African collaborative for good health for women in Africa. Nelson Maszinvgo is also part of the Shashe community and a founding member of that. And he and I have known Nelson for a long time. He went through a sort of more conventional agricultural training, doing a diploma in agriculture, and came out having learned I'm sure he would agree, the wrong things. But he, in the 90s, worked and learned a lot from various people in civil society. And then in 2000 became a full-time smallholder farmer. He also works closely with La Via Campesina and is the general coordinator for ZIMSOFF. Vongai Dube, who is also one of our speakers, is a farmer also in Shashe and grows a diverse fruit orchard and is a very creative farmer. And she also has a mini replica of Great Zimbabwe at her homestead, which is significant to the fact that she links closely to cultural and spiritual history. So those are our three people that are speaking. I'm just going to ask Elizabeth or Nelson, either of you. I don't know if Elizabeth's been able to join and can hear us. Elizabeth, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, John. How are you?
Well done. Fine, thanks. Well done for persisting. So perhaps you could give a little bit of a background to Shashe community and the situation there. And then we're going to show a short film just to give the participants an idea of where you are and what you're doing and your situation there. And then we'll have some more questions after that. So if you could just give a little bit of a background to the Shashe community.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Greetings to you all. In brief, Shashe is a community which really was settled during the land reform program, which took place in Zimbabwe in 2000. And in total, and we are coming from different districts in from Maszinvgo
Elizabeth, you're breaking up a lot.
in Zimbabwe. Especially some of them came from Midlands and some in Maszinvgo province. The community of we are region.
So it looks like Elizabeth, maybe you could continue, Nelson, take over from Elizabeth. I'm afraid, Elizabeth, we're just not getting you. So I'm going to ask Nelson to carry on.
Can you hear me well?
Yep, I can hear you well. Thanks.
Yes. Nelson can go ahead.
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. Like Mother Elizabeth has alluded before, is that we actually settled in the Shashe block of farms way back in 2000. And being smallholder farmers who were working with grassroots non-governmental organization that was called Association of Zimbabwe Traditional Environmental Conservationists, and our process of occupying the Shashe block of farms was actually to move forward the revolution on access to land. And by this we were more like led by the spirit mediums, war veterans, and traditional chiefs for the reasons that we wanted to pursue what in fact the whole movement on the revolutionary struggle was all about, and trying to bring back to the people of Zimbabwe that access to that basic resource, which is very important for any economic development. So we came in as farmers who then were about to bring in a more like a transformation to the whole process on what we have ever experienced on the work that we have been doing with the Association of Zimbabwe Traditional Environmental Conservationists, where we wanted to walk the talk, and we wanted to showcase all the practices about endogenous development, all the practices of what we have learned from the spirit mediums, what we have learned from the farmers, and what we had also learned from all the civil society organizations as far as promoting what is local. So we came in to occupy the Shashe block of farms, and then formally we were resettled as new farmers on the land that is almost like 15,020 hectares of land, which was formerly for cattle ranching, and being owned by just 3 farmers with less than 11 workers, and almost like 400 smallholder farmers were resettled in the block of farms. And as cattle ranching was the norm, we occupied almost like 4,000 hectares of land on our arable and homestead development, and 11,000 hectares of land was left for grazing our livestock. But this time, not only cattle, but many diverse kind of livestock, be it goats, sheep, chickens, pigs, guinea fowl, rabbits, and many other, those that you can talk about in as far as livestock is concerned. And we also brought in very much diverse kind of crops on the land that has never produced any crop before for the past 50 years. And this was just more like a turning point into the process of the Shashe block of farms. And this led to this kind of innovation to say what kind of training that may be required by the local community to be able to defend themselves from the shocks that Zimbabwe by that time was actually suffering. And that's how we ended up then convincing the Maszinvgo Lands Committee to establish the Shashe Agroecology School. If you go on the map, you would find we are actually located to the north of Maszinvgo district, and just right on the central part of Zimbabwe. And in our area, we receive less than 400 millimeters of rainfall. And when the seasons are very bad, when it's normal, it's just 400 millimeters. And the good news with this season this year is that we almost like receiving above normal rainfall. So far, we have recorded more than 470 millimeters of rainfall, and we're looking forward just to a very good season that is going to give us quite diverse food in the Shashe block of farms. And this is how, in fact, the background that led to us to innovate this whole idea, where we were beginning to vision us leading a process for total agrarian reform in Zimbabwe, when we would want to own the seeds to build up the water cycle and to build up the nutrient cycle, and also to maintain that diversity that has ever been onto this land for the past 50 years, when it was specifically for cattle ranching, and also trying to build a movement from the grassroots where farmers can begin to link on their own and can begin to educate each other.
Great, fantastic. I think that really gives us a good background, and I think shows the pioneering spirit of this group of farmers who really, as more and more people recognize the mistakes that have been made in following the Green Revolution, I think what they've done over the years and what they've learned, and the skills and the methods of sharing it as farmer to farmer, I think these are going to be invaluable to Zimbabwe going ahead, especially facing the climate crisis as we will increasingly. So if Vince, you could put on the film. We'll have a look at this film now to give you a sort of more visual perspective on where they live and so on. And then we'll go into some more discussion and questions after that. Oh, Vince, could you do the film?
And now our coming to the Shashe block of farms, the very strong turning point that emphasize on integrated and ecological sustainable agriculture, where we emphasize now to bring in the different diverse food crops, and at the same time to bring in the different livestock species other than just specializing on cattle ranching as before. So we started here by developing a plan, drawing a plan as a family, so that at least we know how we were going to develop our center of excellence, how we were going to develop our land use design, how we were going to manage our soil fertility, how we were going to establish water harvesting structures that were going to function both to collect our soils and at the same time harvesting water. Here, when we are talking about harvests, we don't just talk of harvesting crops and say we have done the best. We talk of many harvests: water harvest, soil harvest, crops harvest, livestock harvest, and different other projects that we've integrated into the system. So our land use design is structures that connects dead level controls to earth dams that act as collection point. When there is a lot of rain, always the earth dams will collect that moisture, that water, and then store it for other uses for irrigating and also for continuing to replenish the underground water supplies. And we have integrated the different livestock species here. Here we keeping cattle, goats, chickens, guinea-fowl, and turkeys, and the pigeons. And the reasons for integrating this livestock is for us to have a very permanent source of organic manure, because we believe we need to feed the soil so that the soils can feed the plants, and it is our task to always, every season, harvest as much manure, and our target for every season is to get as much as 100 scotch carts of crow manure, and almost like 10 scotch carts from compost, and 5 scotch carts from other small livestock that we direct to where there is need in terms of fertility and management. We have established here structures that keep our food, the food granary and the dryers, and we have established again separately the structures that keep our local seed varieties, the seed bank. It's one of the first otherwise in my Maszinvgo province, and this is a household gene bank. I mean household seed bank, and the reason for making it a household seed bank is to practice it at first at family unit, so at least you can get the experience. So if you go to a meeting where there's a debate about seed, you are not just going to listen to what others say, but you are going to share your experiences as well, like any other farmer. So we can end up developing a community seed bank after we have successfully achieved the household seed banks, and many of the different farmers have done the same kind of an initiative to keep seeds separately from the food crops.
Other thing in Region 4, why we concentrate more on agroecology. Since we got our pieces of land in 2002, we found out that there were farmers who were growing tobacco, who were growing cotton. But for us, because we really wanted to revive the traditional farming knowledge systems, we really emphasized more on small grains. And we are just happy to mention that even the government right now is also supporting the production of small grains, and it is an advantage to us because we have received so many farmers from different countries to come and see what we practice here at Shashe Agroecology School and at the Centers of Excellence. For me as a woman, I am also proud to be a woman farmer practicing agroecology, keeping the women's seeds, because we know very well it is important for each and every household to have an experience where she or he can share with other farmers coming from other places. Where we are now, in this small hut, I decided to establish a small library, because we know very well that each farmer has to have a library whereby if you have some visitors, they can also look at the books, read the books which you have, and the seeds which you can foresee in my shelves. These are the seeds which I have also planted in my farm. Most of them, these are small grains and pulses. Why pulses? Because in 2016 I was nominated to be the ambassador of the International Year of Pulses by the UN, FAO, United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. So it is a room where I really want to keep all these seeds such that whoever comes, it's a showcase that they know exactly what is on the farm. The other purpose is that we don't want to lose such seeds. So when I have my seed bank, it's not a seed bank as such. This is just a showroom whereby the seed bank will also have the same seeds which we are seeing in this showroom. And one of the main reasons why we keep these seeds is because of our region. This is Region 4. We are practicing agroecology, and because of the little and minimum rainfall we receive here in Region 4, it is essential and very important for us to grow such crops. And we
panapa tikushandisa mandona dzekubatana nadzo mvura. Yokutanga inonzi upland conservation, yechipiri inonzi downland conservation, yechitatu inonzi micro basin conservation, yechina inonzi mulching conservation. Zose inzira dzose dzekubatana nadzo mvura. tinokushanda panapa neupland conservation because panapa pari pagomo pano tichitanga kugara panapa. Saka takanoti katikata makandiwa nespeed yemvura yanga iri pano asingashandi zvachose, aingozara ozadzwa nesilt, mvura yabuda yoenda pasina nguva ngani munda wadi waoma. Saka takazoona kuti no method chaiyo yakanyanya kunaka upland conservation inova ndiyo iyi yatikutaura nezvayo nematombo. Dombo rinoti zvose the riches inenge iri munomu yose inosara mvura inobuda zvayo ichihambirana but inenge yava smart yasiya upfumi hwese munomu musha, nokuti munomu ndo mune zvese, ndo mune matanga, ndo mune zvirugu, ndo mune makombosti, ndo mune chi, saka ndo mune upfumi hwese hwevhu, saka haufaniri kuti humbobuda. Saka upland conservation ndo mushonga wekupedza zvose. And pamakandiwa tine mhando mbiri dzatinoshandisa panapa. Tine standard contour neyatinoti dead level contour. Dead level contour inodesignwa kana panenge paine slope yakanyanya kurereka, kuti mvura yose nespeed yayo inobva yanogamiwa yobva yarohwa, ndaa muri kuona iri pasi dead level. Inonge ichitenderera nemunda wese ichigadzira speed yemvura kuti isanyanya kuti kumhanya zvine simba, zvokuti yose inoperera imomo, hapana inobuda chimena kwaninda. Micro basin ndeimwe nzira, vamwe vanomati diga ufe kana kuti diga udye, iyo zita chacho diga udye, nokuti vakatoshanda notoriasi diga ufe kuda kuwedzera usimbe kuvanhu kuti vasashanda. Ndiwawo madhishi ekuti kana ukagadzira munda wako uchiisa madhishi imomo, wodzara mbeu dzako, auzodzara mbeu 1 padhishi rimwe chete, bhozo riri rakakura maybe riri 30 centimeters by 20 centimeters deep, 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters, zvinodependa zvoda kuti zvidii nokufita kwako. Unodzara mbeu 3 mugomba rimwe chete, kana kuti unosanganisira kuti unodzara mbeu inoda chikafu chakawanda muvhu, wogodzara mbeu inoita fixed nitrogen to the soil, iri legume, wogodzara mbeu inoita ground cover, panga vana mavisi, vana mapudzi nemanhanga. Iyo mulching conservation iyo inoita kuti kana mvura iri shoma zviya painenge yanaya papa ikangomira mukati memauswa yaya, mwando unogona kutomboti mbeu dzinoramba dzichirarama zvakasiyana nedziya dzedzo dzingoti kana mvura yatonaya dziri pabackground mwando wotoinga. Ndo marimiro atoita pano.
Vince, are we back on? Vince, are we? Okay, great. Thanks so much for that. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the environment that farming in region 4, Zimbabwe is classified in 5 natural regions. 1 is the sort of highest altitude, highest rainfall, and 5 is the lowest rainfall, and that tends to be lower altitude. So region 4 is pretty near the driest part of the country. I mean, the thing is, it's not all bad, because if you practice real farming, as this conference is about, then the soils are not leached. So there's a lot of minerals in the soils because they've had such little rainfall. They're not leached. So, but if you don't practice real farming, then it's a fragile environment, and you can destroy the environment very quickly. So that's where they are, and a lot of Zimbabweans live in drier parts. The whole land division that took place in the colonial times sort of pushed black Zimbabweans into the sort of dry, hotter areas. So what they're doing there, and the example they're setting there, is extraordinary, and I think it's important to recognize that. So I think what would be interesting for viewers to hear a little bit more about, so I'll leave it to you to decide between you who, unfortunately we haven't got Elizabeth, her connection's broken, but the 3 others, I think there are 3 other speakers, I'll leave it to you to decide who answers. But maybe you could talk a little bit more about the Agroecology School and how that works, because I think that would be interesting to hear, because I think that's a key part of your strategy.
Yeah, the whole idea of the Agroecology School came about as a result of trying now to address the complex issues that the smallholder farmers were facing. But primarily, it was all about the farmers' rights, you know, in where we're talking about access to resources that make the farmer survive and what makes that farmer to be almost like recognized in the whole discourse of food production, and where when we're talking about food politics and where we want to place the farmer and where we want to put value on the farmer and make that farmer almost like be the guardian of the whole ecosystem. Because even if you go back to the Bible, you will find that this is what God actually did to Adam, to give him the land and then to farm and keep it all, not keeping it as such, but nurturing the whole biodiversity. So this idea of establishing the Shashe Agroecology School came about to try to revive the whole indigenous knowledge systems that have been managing the whole ecosystem in a very sustainable way, and came about again to revive again the whole issue on seed sovereignty, because you would find that there were lots of issues that were actually attached to seed, as many people were beginning to lose that quality food that they have been eating for years, and it disappearing was almost like an alarm to indicate that the nutritional levels in the households are almost depleting. It was all about the whole idea to say we are in region 4, and being in region 4, it means you are going to always suffer the rest of the seasons that you are going to approach if you are not going to manage the water cycle, because the rainfall pattern is not very much positive into the production cycle, to the production levels that you might want to do. But then you need to come in with methods that will help you to produce. And it was all about, again, the issue of nutrient cycle, where you cannot always continue to poison the soil. You have to take the soil as a living soil, a soil that is surviving, it, which has lots of different kind of microbes that you can even not see by your naked eye. And what is your responsibility as a farmer is then that you have to feed the soil so it is able to feed the crops, because it's the responsibility of the soil to feed the crops. It's not the responsibility of the farmer. And that's how we make very wrong decisions, by even ending up feeding the soils with poisons, because we think that's the most appropriate kind of a method. But then it is all about how you have to manage the cycles that have ever been created by God, and which you find always into the discourse of life, and how the ecosystem is actually interdependent. And how do you send the message out? We decided then that we have to establish what we call centers of excellence.
Nelson, you've muted yourself by mistake there.
Okay, sorry. We established what we called the centers of excellence. The centers of excellence are the family farms, whereby you have to establish a farm that has to demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt the different kind of examples, the different kind of practices, whereby you talk about diversity, you talk about recycling, you talk about resilience, you talk about the culture, you talk about the food tradition. By this, what I'm talking about is that we have to increase plant life in these different kind of species, and we have to look at linking and connecting the different enterprises on the farm so that they depend on each other, and that reduces the cost of functioning on the specific farmer. And then you have to talk about resilience. As the climate is changing, it means the farmer has to respond to the climate changes, and how that is to happen, it means you have to go back to your books and try to bring in that local innovation, that local variety, those local varieties that ever we have been growing. And then what is your culture? What has been your role as a person into the society, and where are you coming from, and where are you going, and how do you connect into the cultural values that actually touches all the farming business from a traditional point of view, where you actually integrate even ceremonies and rituals that have to be associated with the whole process. And what have we been eating, and what have our fathers and parents been eating, and what was it actually contributing to? Because we are not machines. We are not just like cars, which you can just feed with petrol. We actually have to have nutrition in our bodies. And what is that food that would provide us that nutrition? But then fundamentally, the most important areas that we thought about is the centers of excellence was to look on two important resources, that is the soil and water. How do you manage the water cycle, and how do you manage the soil? And because the soil is what actually is holding us, it is part of us, and it is how we are born and how we are surviving. And then how do you get all that into context and then develop it into a process that educate other farmers from the center of excellence perspective? And the farmers who developed those centers of excellence, their responsibility primarily was then to facilitate the farmer-to-farmer learning, because we believe in seeing, and once we see what others are doing, then we are able to take the best practices and then begin to share those and express those to wherever we could be, and even in our communities. Whatever we are going to see, whatever we are going to learn from them, it will be very, very easy and even very practical in its total sense, that you can really adopt to the results that you have actually learned from what the Center of Excellence is then doing. And this became a very strong bridging block in the whole extension discourse, where then farmers are able to connect on their own, where you don't need anyone to actually send any message to, but you have to ask for technical expertise to come to strengthen what the farmers are doing from the farmer to farmer learning and exchanges. So the whole idea of establishing the Shashe Agroecology School then was then to spread vertically and horizontally the whole idea on this modern farming practices of agroecology.
Great, thank you very much. And I think you mentioned a lot on soil and water there, and you also mentioned, I think, a very important resource that you pay a lot of attention to is seed. So I'd like to ask Vongai if she could tell us a little bit about your seed bank at home, just to give the audience an example of the kind of crops that you're saving seed from, and if you have any figures on how many different varieties you have, and just to give them a sense of what you're doing around seed.
Thank you for giving me this time to share with you what we are doing as a farmer. As for seed, we are keeping a variety of seeds, especially for seed for women, pulses, and also small grains. They are also kept in the seed bank. The reason why we keep the seed in the seed bank is that we want to prevent it from being stolen and also from being vandalized even by children. So we also built our seed bank far away from the homestead for safekeeping, because the seed is also variable. It is also not supposed to be tempered around. We also keep some varieties of maize, cereals, oils, and also pulses. For maize, we grow open pollinated varieties like what we call in Shona, Chinyamgage, and Ikirikingi. What we do for our seeds, the selection of seeds starts from the field. We collect our seeds and we put them in the dryers under a shade, because the seeds do not require direct heat from the sunlight for drying. After that, we share our seeds and pack them into small quantities so that they can be affordable by most farmers And we also use our traditional methods of preserving our seeds, like ashes from our local trees, and also we use some gum trees to prevent our seed from being from pests and also from diseases. I think that is what I'm doing as a household farmer for keeping my local and available seed at home.
Great, thanks very much. Do you have any idea of how many varieties you have of different seeds? What would you guess? Is it 10, 20, 30? Roughly, very roughly. Different varieties of maize, different varieties, but your total different varieties.
The total varieties of seed I have at my household is about more than 50 varieties.
More than 50, yeah.
Yes.
No, that's what I was thinking, and I think that's and many farmers have that as well, and that's part of your diverse diet. So and those 50 you're planting every year, so that's giving you nutrition from those 50 different, and then I guess some seeds in a dry year will do better than other seeds, and in a wet year other seeds. So you're covering yourself like that. Okay, thank you very much for that. There's a question.
Another important thing I want to share with you is that most of the seeds, we get them when we held our seed shows, and we exchange also the seeds with the neighboring farmers. That is how we get our seeds.
Yeah, no, very important practice. So there's a question from the audience that's asking, are most of the families in Shashe food self-sufficient? Is there much for marketing? Could you say a little bit about the food situation in Shashe and if people are able to produce a surplus for market? That's a question from the audience.
I think Mother Elizabeth will take up.
Elizabeth, can you hear us? Would you like to?
John, can you try to repeat the question? Yes. Can you try to repeat the question?
So people are just asking about in Shashe community, is everybody food self-sufficient, and do people have any surplus for marketing? That was the question from the audience.
Yes, regarding the surplus for marketing, John.
Go ahead.
We are really to servicing our local markets. First of all, before we look at the national markets. Why? Because it is very important for the families to be well equipped with enough food in the community before we think to take our surpluses to Maszinvgo market. We really try to exchange or barter trade at the local level. Then if we are keeping much of our surpluses, we are feeding our animals, especially in this dry climate crisis. We do not have enough stock feeds. So we're using some of these grains to feed our animals, our cattle, pigs, chickens. But in case the possibility of how we are going to reach the market, but before we think of marketing, we really want to see our granaries are full to the capacity that in any way in the next seasons we will not really go hungry. That is our first priority before we even think of taking our surplus to the market.
Great. Thanks very much, Elizabeth. That worked well until the end. You started to cut out again.
Being food to
Elizabeth, your connection's gone again. It was
Their
good
capacities.
Okay, so thanks very much.
Now, can you hear me, John?
Yeah, we got most of it, and I think we got the strong emphasis on food self-sufficiency first and foremost, and thinking about the years ahead, and only then do you start thinking about marketing. There's another question from the audience, just to get a rough idea of what are the sizes of farms in Shashe? What's the variation in size of farms? Could you give, either you or Nelson or someone else, give some?
Yes. Each farmer is allocated was allocated 8 hectares of land, and this 8 hectares is actually looking at both arable and homestead. And our land is what we call and farm program self-contained units, whereby we have both arable and homestead within one unit. And our grazing for our livestock is what we call a common grazing, and this is then that goes into what I have alluded before to say it's 11,000 hectares, and this is common to every farmer who is within the Shashe block of farms. And I mentioned again that we have close to 400 farmers that were resettled in the block of farms, and these were official settlers, and these then were allocated each that size of a piece of land to actually work on for purposes of food production, and that is definitely producing very much diverse kind of food per farmer because of that strategy that I alluded before.
Great, thanks so much. We're sort of nearly drawing to the end. We've got about 5 minutes left. There's a very specific practical question, maybe back to Vongai on the seed. You mentioned ash. How do you actually use the ash? So one of the participants would like to know how do you use ash? If you could explain as best as you can, what do you do?
Okay, thank you. What we normally do using the ashes, we just burn the firewood, the dry firewood. Then after that, we'll take, for example, a shovel of this ash into a bucket of our seed. Then we mix together. That is how we use the ash. Okay, so it's roughly a shovelful of ash to a bucket of... to a 20 kg bucket of seed. 20 kg bucket of seed. Okay, so maybe just one more question. If you, and this is for anyone, if you were advising a young person, because we're trying to get young people involved in farming, who wanted to get involved in agroecological farming, what advice would you give them as they start out to be a farmer?
Yes, there is that discussion. If you are in the primary education, even secondary education, is that if you don't pass school, you will become a farmer, meaning it's more like reducing farming into a very low and meaningless kind of an enterprise for any young person to venture into, maybe just other than just being a pilot or a doctor and others. But yet agriculture is the only employment that is going to survive, as technology is almost like taking over every kind of enterprise. Like here we have the phones, which have taken over radios, which has taken over watch, and all those people who have been doing all these different enterprises have lost employment. But the farmer who is producing food is almost like having a ready market where each one of us, when things are normal, you will need 3 meals per day. And then when things are bad, maybe others can have 1, or others can have 2. So the biggest enterprise one can go into when you are young, when you have got all the energy, is going into farming, because that's how you can begin to enjoy it. When you want to to go into such kind of enterprise, the most important issue is how to make it more sustainable so that it is able to keep you, and so that it is able to stay with you, and it is able to sustain even your life and even your future generations. And by so doing, you have to manage the soil, you have to manage the water, and you have to have the seeds, and you have to have that control of what kind of production that you are going to do on the farm, and be visionary onto the future generations, because they are the future managers of the land. And this is how agriculture is been evolving, and this is how we have to keep it ongoing, and this is how we can make business from agriculture. In economic terms, you would find the production costs for a farmer who is practicing agroecology are very limited, though we can talk about the energy invested into the production cycle. But what is important, how it keeps on now to sustain itself, because it will be a well-developed kind of an enterprise that will be well integrated with lots of different and diverse kind of produce that has to keep everything moving and ticking.
Great, thanks so much. And I mean, some of the key words there, I think you had enjoy, visionary. And I think what you're emphasizing as well, giving all those examples, is that agroecology is very much different, because farming has got a bad name with young people. And I think a lot of it is because it's kind of seen as something that's very top down. You just do what others tell you what to do, and apply your chemicals and so on. Whereas the kind of farming that you're seeing there in Shashe is creative, innovative farming, and something that I know all of them enjoy doing, and they see it as very much part of culture. It's a spiritual activity. It's about something for the future generations. It's not just farming. It's much, much more than farming. It's a way of life. And I thank you very much to all of you in Shashe, and keep up the fantastic work that you're doing there, because we need examples like that. I think we're getting to the end of our time. I think we have to be strict. So thank you to those who joined us in the audience. And I'm sure you could learn more from others in due course. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Bongai. Thank you, Nelson. And thank you, Kushal and Vince, for helping out. Enjoy.